So, hi everyone again, I'm CeCe Aparo, and I am the director, thank you. I am the director of marketing and business development here at EverTrue. So disclaimer, I joined EverTrue about 2 months ago. So on my first day, I was sitting down with Brent and we're talking about priorities and the things I'm working on, and halfway through the conversation he said, you know, by the way, we're putting on this big conference in July. And I was like, 2018? He was like, no, 2 months, and we're expecting 250 people. So naturally, I was a little bit nervous because that didn't seem like a lot of time, but wow, I am blown away by the sessions this morning. We're only halfway through, and I have to give a huge round of applause to the marketing team who has really pulled this entire event together. So please join me. So in the last 2.5 months, I've spent a lot of time learning not only about EverTrue and the product and the problems that we're solving, but also spent quite a bit of time learning about the world of advancement, because that's not something I'm familiar with. And what I've been really struck by is that while nuanced, there's a great deal of overlap between the world of advancement and the world of sales. And we're gonna spend a lot of time talking about that during this session, because at the end of the day, sales and advancement, we're all doing the same thing. Trying to find ways to talk to and engage with the right people at the right time. And in order to do that, and to do that effectively, we need to have the right people in place, the right processes in place, and the right metrics in place. So I am thrilled today to be joined by Janet, Guy, and Matt to talk a little bit about that. So before we jump in, quick background. So we have Guy Hart here. Guy is the founder and CEO of Plus Delta. He spent 13 years in the for-profit world before starting Plus Delta, which works with, 100 plus institutions, yep. Many of whom I am sure are represented here in the audience today. So in Guy's role, he's spending quite a bit of time working with schools to improve donor satisfaction by increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of frontline fundraisers. So welcome, Guy. Next, I have Janet Comenos, and Janet is the CEO of Spotted Media. Prior to starting Spotted, Janet served as the SVP of sales at PromoBox, so you guys heard Ben speak earlier. And Janet was named the top 20 woman in technology by Accomplice Ventures back in 2015. So we're super excited to have her here today. And finally, I have Matt Ewing from Boise State. Matt joined Boise State back in 2014 as the AVP of development, and in his role serves working on the university advancement leadership team, providing strategic direction around everything, as I was creating your bio, major gifts, annual giving, corporate and foundation relations, as well as donor relations. And prior to joining Boise State, Matt was at the Indiana University Foundation in a variety of roles there. So thank you guys for joining us. Before jumping into the meat of the conversation, I have a couple questions for each one of you. Guy, you work with quite a few different institutions and have seen programs be really successful. As you think about what has made those programs successful, what are the key themes that stick out to you?
So it's been interesting for us over the last 13 years to see how organizations take in the tools and skills that we give them and to varying degrees become successful. They figured out that it's about culture, and so they're investing in their culture internally and a culture of performance. And the difference there is that there's a recognition that it's not just about metrics anymore, because measuring your gift officers is certainly important. Measuring the right things is even more important, and giving them the skills to actually achieve those metrics are part of actually a whole solution. So a culture that understands that we're going to build skills and we're going to measure how we perform against those skills and using those skills, those are the institutions that we've seen that become really productive and really become not just performance-based, but you create sort of this virtual cycle because you can attract more of the same kinds of gift officers, or in some cases are non-traditional gift officers that come from other industries. So that creates a sustaining sort of flow of smart people, but also a productive institution.
I'm excited to dig into that and talk a little bit about the profile of the right hire and where you're finding these people.
Sure.
So Janet, for you, when we were preparing for this session, you joked and said sales is at the core of everything you do, even in your role today as a CEO. You have this sales first mentality. Tell me a little bit about how that trickles down into the rest of your organization.
Yeah, absolutely, and it probably helps to give you a little bit of background on what we do. So Spotted has the largest database in the world of all the brands that celebrities use and wear and drive. So we track about 10,000 brands across all the most famous people worldwide. And it's funny, I kind of view myself still as a BDR. I spent a couple years as a BDR early in my career, and I think...
Can you explain to everyone exactly what a BDR is? That's a term we're going to throw out a lot during this conversation.
It's basically a junior sales rep who's responsible for calling and reaching out to customers to kind of attract them to your business. And I think, I tell that to our team regularly, and we actually do have a BDR team at Spotted, and I think that does a couple things. It grounds us with a sense of humility, because no job is too small for anybody, regardless of their level of seniority. But I think it also makes us a very goal-oriented organization, because we treat everything that we do at Spotted as if it were a sales process. So we set projected end dates and close dates, and we're very numbers and goals driven. Yeah.
That's awesome. So Matt, I was really interested when you were telling me a little bit about your program and how it's set up and how you have your team structured, both at Indiana University Foundation and now at Boise State. Sounded to me a little bit different than the traditional advancement office. So we'd love for you to kind of share with the audience about how your team is structured.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference between Indiana and then coming to Boise State is the size and scale and maturity of both the universities and its advancement shop. And so when I came to Indiana, came to Boise State, was charged a lot with just putting some of the best practices in place. And so was really able to pull some of the Indiana playbook out to get that going. But then I quickly realized, and you'll pick up on a lot of these themes I think throughout this conference, is as a profession, we have to advance beyond just the best practices and some of the old ways of doing things. And one of those programs that we're starting, similar to the VDR team that Janet spoke about, is building a team of purely frontline fundraisers that all they do is qualify. They have no other job other than to be out of the office, hitting kind of our mid-gift range of donors, and first saying thank you, but then starting to move them and qualify them up through the pipeline. That's really important in terms of us building our pipeline, but it's also really important in terms of us building our talent pool. And so when we think about someone's career as a fundraiser, we choose to hire those people really without any experience whatsoever. I'll give Guy a plug, and I'll be honest here. We are Plus Delta clients. I'm a firm believer in their program and the disciplined approach that can be brought to this profession. But that's just something that I think some institutions are doing. But if you really want to ramp up building both your donor pipeline and your talent pipeline in terms of your future major gift officers, is an area everyone should be really invested in.
Let's talk a little bit about the talent and the people first. So you talked about that junior gift officer profile, and I would love for you, Janet, to talk about this on the BDR front as well. What are the qualities that you're hiring for when you're going through that interview process? And Guy, what have you seen be successful?
So I think the role specifically requires a couple of things. One is that, and we see this with clients all the time, is that if you're trying to build for a specific function, so if you've got qualification resources doing discovery, if you've got major gift officers, I think there's an intellectual curiosity that person has to demonstrate, because deans are going to want to know that you want to understand their programs, and docs are going to want to understand what you do in the clinic and what he or she does and from a research perspective. So that curiosity is really important. There's also a level of awareness and discipline that have to come together, because if the gift officers are not aware of what stage they're in, for example, with a particular prospect, that's a difficult place to begin a next conversation with a prospect or donor. So that awareness of assumptions that they're making, et cetera, and a level of discipline of not just making X number of phone calls, or not just making sure you're filling your trip when you travel to a certain geography, but the discipline of making sure that the conversation actually is structured in a way that enables a philanthropic discussion, as opposed to what gift officers can default to at times, which is just relationship and friend raising. So they can burn a lot of clock time and stay out of that philanthropic conversation while still being of service or being a good ambassador. So that discipline of staying on track in that philanthropic conversation is crucial.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and for us, I think I always look for three things in sales candidates, regardless of their kind of level. And that's, we need people who care about winning, learning, and making money. And if I look at across my friends who work in sales, whether they're fundraisers or they work in telecom, they have that common thread, those three common threads. And if you're missing one of those three components, it often presents a challenge, I've found.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Matt, anything to add?
I think the only thing I would add is that winning is important. And I oftentimes think of our profession as we can start to drift away and get uncomfortable with that concept of sales. And I want someone that is self-motivated and wants to win. Yeah. My preferred management style is to give them the resources they need, provide the structure and make sure they understand where they're going, and then get out of their way. And that takes a really self-motivated person to be able to be disciplined enough to work within that environment.
Yeah, I always say the most successful salespeople that I've seen have some track record of winning, be that on the field or in the classroom or in their professional career, and they know what that feeling of winning is like, and they want to repeat that in their work. So I think that's really important. Where do you find these people? That person or those qualities that you're explaining, while it seems pretty basic, they're hard to find. It's really hard to find great frontline customer-facing folks. So where are you finding them?
It's an absolute challenge, and I think that there are a lot of organizations are leading in this sense, which is they're growing their own. And so you're starting with gift officers who will begin at the annual fund or have started life in admissions or donor relations in some way, and they'll pull them over onto the development side because if they know the institution, we can teach them the skills. And we were having a sidebar conversation a little bit earlier about, in some cases, younger gift officers make great future major gift officers because they have fewer bad habits to change. This sort of source of talent, and Boise State has done a terrific job of creating that qualification role, or that discovery team or advancement team is what Duke University calls it, where those gift officers are doing a portion of the whole, what we call the donor engagement process, a lot of qualification, a lot of relationship building, but also beginning that philanthropic conversation. So they get a lot of practice, so they make a great internal pool from which to recruit. So the grow your own mentality, I think, is an effective one. It has ramifications for talent management, et cetera, so it sort of drives a shift in other ways in the organization. But there are lots of folks out there that are fundraisers, but that disposition around being disciplined, having the right awareness, and being intellectually curious is a Venn diagram that's sort of hard to recruit for. It's hard to test for when you recruit, but growing your own seems to be most effective.
And Matt, that's exactly what you guys are doing. So what does that career progression look like in your office?
We just promoted our first one out of that program into a major gift role. And so that's certainly one path that can go. I'm always really open. I like to have open conversations with everyone on our team about career paths. My vice president, myself, and our executive director of our alumni association sit down once a year, and we've got a 4-year growth plan mapped out on the areas we want to invest in, the area and opportunities, gaps that we have to grow. And then I share that with the team and making sure that they are all on board, or they understand that, but also they can see, and as a leadership team, we have to identify who the people on the team fit into that growth, and ultimately some that won't and don't. With our leadership annual giving team specifically, we intentionally hire younger people to do that, and so we'll recruit out of our student leaders, our Greek leaders, our student body presidents, those type of people that also know the organization, and as Guy said, we can teach them everything else. Right. I intentionally don't hire anyone for that role that has any fundraising experience. And that's intentionally focused on that. The challenge I have with them oftentimes is the pace at which they want that next promotion to come. And so what we really stress, and we all think that way. What's the next challenge?
Yeah,
what's the next opportunity for us? And I want people that want to grow like that. But it's having a really open conversation on the front end when you're hiring them about almost the minimum time scale that's going to take before that next move. So we talk to them about really diving in and honing this craft, and we would be doing a disservice to you if we're moving you to the next thing within a 2 to 4 year period. You're not going to get the skills that are necessary to really be a true professional in this area if you come, do it for 2 years, and then we move you to a major gift job. We're doing them a disservice, the institution a disservice, and the profession a disservice. So it's really being open and honest with them on the front end about what that timeline is going to look like, and then really having to manage that timeline even once they start to get some success and they think they're ready. Again, it's a disservice if we move them too quickly.
I have a thought on that, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm of the opinion that it's so easy to promote people, and sales reps and fundraisers are really driven by promotions. So we actually, maybe we've taken it too far in the other direction, but we have a 7-level hierarchy, and people never go more than 6 months, really, without getting promoted at Spotted, at least on the sales team. And I think that really shows your employees that you care about them, and you're giving them more responsibility, and you're trusting them. And I think it's really helped ensure that we have really high retention.
Yeah, have you guys seen a difference, maybe Guy, when you've worked with institutions who have that type of career progression versus those who don't? Have you seen a difference in terms of the motivation of the people on the team?
Yeah, sure. I think from a sort of human perspective, you want to know, as Matthew said, what's next for you.
Right.
And I think what really effective organizations are doing is making it clear that if you want to function at that next level, here's what it takes. And so they create vehicles or ways that they can shadow somebody that's at the next level, so they have a real experience of what that's like, so that they can both aspire to but prepare themselves for it, and also set expectations appropriately, which is, if you really want that, know what you're in for. Not in a threatening way, but yes. And I think that having a clear set of strata that you can move through and criteria to get to each level makes it a lot easier actually for people to focus on their day-to-day, because they can be clear about, and this contributes to that movement, then I know what my job is. So that helps.
Absolutely. One word you guys have thrown around a lot already is qualifying. And what does a qualified lead look like? Because I think if you look at every school, if you ask every single person in this audience, everyone would have a different answer. And if you probably dug into a team a little bit more, every team member would have a different answer as well. So what does a qualified lead or prospect look like for you guys, and how are you making sure that that's known throughout your entire organization?
Please.
Yeah, I'm maniacal about the accounts that can make their way onto our prospect list, because I think any business should be looking at the resources they have and ensuring that those resources aren't wasting time prospecting accounts that aren't a good fit. So we have an ideal customer profile, and there are 6 check boxes that we need to be able to check on any account to add them to our prospect list, to spend 1 minute calling them or spending any amount of time with those prospects. And I think it's just a really healthy exercise to map out that ideal customer profile, regardless of what type of business you're in, and then ensure that your sales team or your fundraising team sticks to only targeting accounts that check all 5 or 6 of those boxes.
Yeah. We, like all of you, probably have fantastic prospect management and research pieces of your organizations, and we have one of those as well. That's one avenue to drum up people that could be moved into portfolios. And I'm going to punt this response because I want Guy to talk about it, because he's truly built a fantastic program that we've adopted at Boise State in terms of, you talked about that 7-point checklist, that hierarchy, particularly that first stage of the donor engagement process, making sure that it is you're mutually agreeing, meaning the frontline fundraiser and the donor, mutually agreeing to move to that next step. And it's really, once you get to that point, that then you're spending time with the right people. We had when I was at Indiana, and I'm not going to talk bad about Indiana, I love there, it's still a donor there. We had a consultant come in as we were moving into our next campaign, and one of their comments, overarching comments, was we had a culture of stewarding and hoping for the gift. And everything, it was so true. I mean, and we were raising hundreds of millions of dollars there. But that's really stuck with me, and again, what I love about the process with Plus Delta and that disciplined approach is you take that away. It ensures that you're being disciplined in the practice, so that you're not only spending the time with the right people, but you're moving through that process mutually together and agreeing to do that together.
So, thank you. I have two answers to that. So as the business owner of a firm with 100 clients, we think about our pipeline in a specific way, and it's got a disciplined structure to it. And then there's the way we think about qualification on behalf of our clients as they're trying to qualify their portfolios and in the context of a campaign or oftentimes in between. So for us as a firm, we have basically 4 criteria that we have to be able to step through, much like Janet's organization does, in terms of being able to engage with a potential client. And there are basic things around operating budget size, staff size, but also decision makers, who they are, budget sizes, et cetera. So that for us is really important and fairly simple in terms of other kinds of sales processes that are out there. Then on behalf of clients, for us, this first stage, as Matthew mentioned, of qualification and that the overall sort of donor engagement process has to do with creating a collaborative experience for the prospect and the donor, as opposed to having them feel like they're being deposed by an attorney. So that you can create this true sense of authentic experience on behalf of a place and a mission they both care about, whether it's a hospital situation or higher education. But we're in this conversation together. You could, if you wanted to, affect the institution in certain ways, in measurable ways, and as well as qualitative. You don't have to, because you're an alum, but would you be open to talking with us about ways that can happen? And so that qualification process happens in that container that you create, and it's basic things around where else are you giving and why. How do you decide on those things? So who are the influencers? And also, for us at some level, there have to be priorities that we're investing in as an institution that you care about as well. And so those are sort of the basic things that you would step through as part of Qualify. But the point is that the commercial sector disciplines that have existed for a long time are very relevant for fundraising. And I think that Josh had mentioned earlier the sort of relative age of the senior managers within higher education. I think that along with them sort of moving on to their next chapter, the next round of leaders understands that the notions of discipline and awareness and having a structured process can still be resident in a fundraising process without compromising the sincerity and the authenticity of somebody's relationship with an institution that had a pretty impactful effect on individuals' lives. And so I think that you can be salesy without somehow being the devil. But I think that, you all know this, but nothing happens until somebody sells something. Right. Full stop. And so the world I come from in management consulting and tech sales was, if you're not solving a problem that's measurable in dollars, you shouldn't be there. And so figure that out first. Be a diagnostic first, and then position the priorities. But if you're not doing those two things, it gets to be hard to raise money effectively.
No, I think we all know this. Just because you have a conversation with a prospect or a potential donor today doesn't mean that they're going to write that check for you. And maybe they're not qualified. Maybe they don't hit those qualification criteria for you. How do you go about nurturing and continuing to engage with those folks before they're ready to sign that check for you?
Yeah, the approach we take, and it's probably similar to how all of you structure your shops, is we want to make sure that we're creating, the difference from sales, I would say, is we are about, and you may push back on this a little bit, we are about a lifetime relationship. We want someone from the time they step on campus as a student until, unfortunately, the time they pass away, to have a lifetime relationship with us. And so all of the different facets of our division and our university advancement team are set up to have that lifetime engagement model. And so knowing that when someone is disqualified, let's say as a major gift prospect, that may be they can't do it right now, we want a home for them. So that may be our alumni association, that may be they're back in the annual giving pool, or they're with our leadership annual giving team where they're getting a little bit more hands-on, or maybe a gift officer just touch the base with them once or twice a year. But we want them to go somewhere. We can't just have them drop off the face of the earth and then try to re-engage them 10, 15 years later when ultimately they have the resources to give back.
I think it's always important when you're touching base throughout the sales process with or a potential donor. Our sales team is not allowed to send emails that just ask for a time to get on a call. So I think the best way to do that is to find out very early on what really matters to the person and to their organization, or in the case of your space, to that donor, and then mapping your solution back to their needs and their desires. So I guess in the fundraising space, if you find out early on what matters to that person about the university, and then you map the potential donation back to making an impact in those areas, I think that's really it's a better reason to reach out.
Absolutely. I think it's really important to make sure that potential prospects or donors like that don't fall through the cracks. And we work really hard on the sales and marketing side of things in the for-profit world to make sure that that doesn't happen. What do the handoffs look like for you? And maybe you can speak to it as it relates to your junior gift officers handing off prospects to your major gift officers. What does that handoff look like, and how are you accounting for those people that might slip through your fingers?
Yeah, we don't. So our junior gift, our leadership annual giving officers is what I'll refer to them as. They have no dollar goals.
Okay.
Now we'll track how much they're raising, and we have a certain expectation that we would need for them to raise to make it worth their while to continue. But they're primarily focused on those pass-offs. What are they qualifying? And we push for both the major gift officer and our leadership annual giving team to understand that it's not always just a clean, or it may not always just be a clean pass-off to the major gift officers. And we set that expectation very early, that it's got to be a very individualized strategy for what's right for that donor. Because the last thing we would want to happen is, if I'm the leadership annual giving officer, they've met with me twice, all of a sudden they're interested and said, okay, now you got to go deal with Guy. And the person may say, well, can't you close this? We've built this relationship. So it's all individualized, and we stress that a lot within our team, so that the major gift team understands that they're not incentivized by how much money they raise, so they have no desire to just close gifts in a vacuum, and instead focusing on what's best for the donor in terms of that pass-off.
I think it's easy at times to think of being donor-centric as, and Josh mentioned this earlier, this notion of, okay, they graduated from this unit or this particular college, their degree is this, they're in this industry now, they have colleagues and cohorts in this particular geography, therefore I think I know what they're going to be interested in, so I'm going to go build a relationship, and when I feel comfortable, I'm going to ask them to give me their money for what I need. And donors hear it that way, and alumni hear it that way. So this notion of how we treat them from the inception of their relationship, perhaps SC does a really good job of this freshman year, they start getting marketed about giving back, all the way through their life, is really important, because I don't think donors are averse to being connected with different parts of the development organization. I think that how we explain to them why those connections exist and what's in it for them matters a lot. So I think we can forget to explain to the prospective donor or the prospect or the donor really, why the institution is a resource for them, and these people that work very hard to make sure that their relationship with us is a satisfying one, an effective one. Can perform their roles really effectively. At the same time, I think gift officers can be really great at being of service, but there's a boundary beyond which we can be too of service, and the philanthropic conversation becomes impossible to have. Right. So those handoffs have to be equally balanced between the relationship and the potential business element that's going to happen in this, and so maintaining that tone around your relationship with us is both and, if you want it to be, has to happen between different resources as that donor experiences their sort of life cycle relationship with us. So,
I think a big piece of that is keeping a sense of urgency alive as part of the conversation. And I know Ben said earlier, and I saw a lot of people retweeted this, which I love, is urgency is a marketer's best friend. And I'd argue that it's a best friend for both marketing, but also for sales. So how do you infuse urgency into your process on behalf of both the prospect and with your team? Easier said than done, I know.
Yeah, so back to the point I was making a minute ago, it's so important to to ask the right questions early on and to understand what matters to the prospect. or the donor. And what we do is at the end of every first call, we have to have found out from the prospect what their personal and company goals are over the next 3, 6, and 12 months, so that if the deal starts to stall later on or we're not hearing back from somebody, we can remind them of the things that they've already told us or reminded us of. And we create timelines. We create our own timeline based on the goals that they're looking to accomplish in 3, 6, and 12 months, so that we can hold them accountable to, so we can map our solution to those goals and kind of create a fake timeline around it to create urgency.
That idea.
Yeah, I mean, we have to create that sense of urgency, but we also have to remember that particularly with philanthropy, it's such an individualized decision, and we can do everything right, and ultimately an outside factor can cause a gift not to happen. And so while I'm talking about this disciplined approach and this driven approach and this competitive side and we want people to win, we also need people to realize that we're in the business of creating joy, and that this is a very individualized decision for someone, and oftentimes our sense of urgency doesn't align with their philanthropic goals.
True. Before we jump into Q&A, would love to just touch on metrics, because I know that's definitely been a hot topic. I was at Case Summit last week, and a lot of people were talking about the metrics that they're tracking and looking at across their team. What metrics do you think are most important, and how often are you looking at them, both individually and with your broader team?
So we see a whole range of different kinds of metrics across the institution base. So, and it's not just that the research publics are measuring these things and the liberal arts elites are measuring these things. There's a wide variation, and it doesn't necessarily isn't necessarily segment specific. But I would go so far as to say the most effective metrics we see are more around productivity as opposed to just activity. Mm-hmm. So you're going to want to measuring what we've seen work well as a blend of activity and performance metrics. So activity, oftentimes gift officers are measured on visits or number of proposals, and that's okay, but busy doesn't beget productive necessarily. And so you can get gift officers that are compliant in terms of meeting their metrics, but they aren't actually having the right kinds of conversations. They may be having those meetings or visits, as they're called. But the right kind of work may not be happening in that. And so I think a more accurate measure can be ratios, ask to grant ratios. Those kinds of measures, I think, from a productivity perspective, are really much more effective in terms of giving you insight into actually what's really happening. Because measurement alone, certainly you will drive the kinds of behaviors that you measure, but if you're not actually tracking behaviors as well, which I think ratios do a better job of, that's a good thing. And I think also clients are starting to do things like measure movement through the process. So if you've got a defined donor engagement process that has 4 or 5 stages in it, you can essentially map all of your prospective donors and your donors onto that process in terms of what stage they're in. And if you time bound the duration of that they should be in each of those stages, roughly measured, you can see that there's actually movement through that process. And that's as important, if not more so, than number of visits. Because if they're being productive, then that's shorter time to money, frankly.
Absolutely. Anything you guys like to add on that front?
Yeah, so and I'm starting to push away from even some of the terminology of metrics with I'll speak specifically for our major gift officers, and this builds off of Guy's point and looking more at describing them as those key performance indicators. So we'll track dollars solicited versus dollars raised, number of major gift proposals and meetings, and then what I call just their overall quality of work. And we equally weight all of those indices, and within the quality of work, it's things like their hit rate, average gift size. Are they using their dean and leadership in appropriate ways? Are they collaborating with individuals? And we don't use the indicators or the metrics in a way that is you either met these and you're doing a great job, or you didn't and you don't. It's a discussion that I have one-on-one with them on a quarterly basis, and it's used to just identify gaps in the work. Mm-hmm. And where the discussion leads to is, as Guy said, is really what is the substance that's driving this activity, and how are you moving someone through the process and or not, that the real coaching and the development of a gift officer happens. And so you have to have those, we have to have some way to measure and track. But I get concerned with shops that are looking solely at you hit a metric or you didn't, And if you hit it, oh, you're doing a good job, where at the end of the day, it may not be driving the right type of activity or building the right type of culture for your shop.
Couldn't agree more.
I have something. I think it's so important to look at the metrics really early on in the sales process, not opens or clicks. And honestly, when my team says that they're looking at opens and clicks on emails, I'm like, you shouldn't be, because it doesn't matter. But I think looking at like meetings booked actually doesn't really help. It's earlier than that. We as employees or even humans are becoming desensitized to email and to LinkedIn messages, because people have all these automation tools these days where they can pump out thousands of emails a week. So on my team, we look the most important metric to me and to us is to understand how much two-way conversation our sales team is creating with their prospects. If people are even looking at their emails and digesting it, because it's so easy to skip over emails these days. So it's not about meetings booked. It's about, okay, are your emails eye-catching? Are people looking at them and reading them and responding? Even if they're responding negatively, at least they're reading it. So that's important to us.
Perfect. Questions from the audience? Yes. Hold on, we're going to have our runners come down. Let's give it up for our runners. They're doing a great job right now. They're back and forth.
I'm Rachel Silver from Colby College, and I have two questions. One is to get back to the title, Fundraising is the New Sales, and the discussion around you really wanting to attract people who are motivated to do that kind of great sales work, that it's promotions in terms of salary and title and how fast you can offer those things and other kinds of incentives. So a lot of us here are from institutions that's don't operate like they're promoting sales forces. They have much slower tracks for promotion and raises. And so how do you, within a system where you may not have the flexibility that you might at a business like yours, you might not be able to offer every 6 months a promotion because the cycle doesn't work that way, or that you can't offer 7 layers of titles. How do you create that feeling within an institution that may not have that flexibility? And the second question is for anyone, but particularly for you to follow up on that question of leadership giving, annual giving officers, incentivizing the handoff. What specific metrics do you have around that, or specific incentives that really reward people who are motivated to be salespeople to feel that thrill of the handoff? How are you incentivizing them specifically?
I'll answer that one first, and it's, we're a state school. We're not a shop that provides, commission on, and I wouldn't ever suggest that our profession should go in that way. Where we have the constructs or the constraints of budget and resources. We have a growth plan. Not every year does the next thing get funded, and then that growth plan has to shift. So what we work really hard on then is the right culture as well, because I'm a firm believer that just getting that next title or getting that next, a little bit more money isn't always what is going to keep someone motivated and to stay with you. If I gave a gift officer another $5,000 or $10,000, they're going to be really excited for 6 months, and then that thrill goes away. If we can create the right culture around continually investing in their professional development, giving them the flexibility and freedom to explore new projects that fit within their sphere and ultimately move our organization forward. So we work really hard at that, and it's a combination of celebrating successes that oftentimes are not monetary or a title, but having the culture where people love to come to work, and we spend every day trying to focus on that. With the leadership annual giving officers, because I don't think I answered that, it's having them be rewarded as well when those pass-offs turn into success. And that when we're talking about tracking credit for a major gift officer, that pass-off and that qualification was equally important as a major gift officer closing that gift. And they played a huge role in what could turn out to a 6+ figure gift, and making sure that they feel really good about that. Beyond that, I would be open to ideas on how we can continue as an industry to incentivize our folks, because I don't know that we've fully figured it out.
I think one thing that I've heard people do when they can't afford to pay people more or promote them regularly, first of all, you can promote people without giving them an incremental bump in pay, but is that every 6 or so months, the boss will add something a little bit new or different to the employees' roles and responsibilities. So maybe that's a new project that you could involve them in with a different team, or maybe some mentoring with individuals on their team. So keeping things kind of fresh and exciting for people is really important if you can't afford to promote them.
We've got an industry that has a high turnover. And so retaining your folks is really important, and so that you have time to actually grow them into the roles that they're in the future for them. So I think the recognition piece is important, as Matthew said, helping them understand that not only recognizing the work that they did, but the impact that work had on size of gift, and therefore the measurable impact on scholarship or physical plant or faculty, et cetera. So just that clear linkage between your work and measurable result is getting better and needs to continue to get better. But that is as much as incentive, if you look at the data, for why people stay in their role as an increase in their salary. The recognition piece is crucial.
Time for one more question. Jesse, hand? No? Great. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Thank you.